Hi everyone. So a viewer was asking me recently about the distinction, the difference between the FE kind of eloquence and the NI kind of eloquence. They were referring to a video I made in the past about, INFJs and eloquence. Are INFJs eloquent? Can they become more eloquent? Are they very eloquent to begin with? Those kinds of questions. And I thought her question was an opportunity to return to this particular angle of discussion, maybe with more insight, because the last time I made a video about INFJ eloquence was a while back, certainly a while back. So there's definitely opportunities for more insight here. And there are things to say too, because the INFJ type of eloquence, in some sense, will have to be compared, at least to some degree, with the ENFJ kind of eloquence, and perhaps also with the INTJ kind of eloquence. We'll see about that. But INFJ eloquence at the center. So first of all, the question of whether INFJs are eloquent is, of course, a nuanced one, or it calls at least for a nuanced response, depending on what kind of INFJ we're talking about, what kind of subtype of INFJ we're talking about. But there's a few things we can say to begin with, right? So the first thing that we can say to begin with is that FE is traditionally associated with eloquence. NI is not traditionally associated with eloquence. In fact, NI is more likely associated with if not a lack of eloquence, at least in some respects an obstacle to the kind of fluidity that you need for eloquence. Spoken eloquence, you understand. You'll notice often that INFJs can be quite eloquent in writing. That's because they have time to unpack their thoughts, because NI takes time. NI is a function that's not a fast function, and that doesn't help with keeping the attention of people. And so you'll notice that INFJs will sometimes struggle to keep people's attention when they are speaking, in everyday life. But in writing, usually when they have all the time in the world to really articulate their points, well, that issue won't manifest itself nearly as acutely. So that's something to keep in mind. We're trying to focus on verbal eloquence, because usually that's what is, that is what people understand, like if someone were to tell you that they know someone who's very eloquent, you wouldn't think that they're speaking about their writing skills. In that case, that person would say, well, he or she writes very well. No, they're talking about whether they can carry you with their way of speaking, right? They have a certain kind of charisma, at least a verbal charisma. That's not really the domain of NI. It's much more the domain of FE, because FE is about emotional resonance with the group, right? So if you can do that, well, that's one big step toward being eloquent. What we can do, though, to attain a better understanding of eloquence is that there's a distinction to be drawn between eloquence that comes from a place of inauthenticity, insincerity, and eloquence that comes from a place, by contrast, of authenticity, sincerity, and usually that requires more depth, right? So you have shallow, superficial kinds of eloquence. Often these people who manifest that, they can impress us, perhaps sway us, but the more we listen to them, the more we become used to how these people operate. In a sense, the less impact that their speech, their way of talking has on us, because we're used to it and we're then able to look past it towards sometimes a certain absence of depth, right? And this is where NI, in the case of INFJs at any rate, starts playing an important role. So NI contributes to eloquence, what you might call authentic eloquence, which is the highest form of eloquence in some respect, right? Versus a more superficial kind of eloquence. Now, if you don't have FE doing the work, you're going to find yourself displaying authentic lack of eloquence. And superficial eloquence is still more effective than authentic lack of it, of course, but it's less effective than authentic eloquence. So if you have a speaker who's able to use emotional resonance, like the emotional resonance of Effie, with the depth of content of NI, and even better, if they're able to bring TI into the picture where there is a care for consistency and coherence, right? That's also a sign of authenticity. You care about the truth, right? So you care about how the truth is preserved in the articulation of your different sentences, your different propositions. That's kind of a TI manifestation. So really the best kind of eloquence for an INFJ is a kind of eloquence that emerges out of the interplay of these three functions. FE for emotional resonance, and as in a sense the most basic superficial kind of eloquent speaking, manifested in a lot of FE dominance, including ENFJs. That's why the ENFJ is an interesting point of comparison, because you'll come across a lot of superficially eloquent ENFJs that might not prove so impactful after a while if you get to know them really well, unless they have NI developed, in which case, you know, you will find those traits. But you know, you can sort of find that with INFJs too, except FE will be less of a given. But if FE is sufficiently harnessed and NI is not repressed, as in the case of a compliant or adaptive submissive INFJ, then you know you have the ingredients for good eloquence, and then it can be supplemented with TI. But the interplay of the different functions is such that introducing TI can also introduce a further complication, a further obstacle, namely that if you're going to introduce TI, you better make sure that the two introverted functions together that you're deploying in this case, NI and TI, don't overwhelm FE, which ultimately remains your baseline of eloquence. Okay, so it's almost better, if you're not too sure about how well you can manage this interplay of three function interplay, it's better to sort of mostly focus on NI and FE, unless you have the maturity, the spiritualizedness perhaps, to bring in TI as well. So hopefully that was useful. Let me know in the comments, guys. If you enjoyed the video, please give me a like. If you want to know more about INFJ eloquence, if you want to know more about INFJ life in the modern world, how it's manifested, how INFJs can be authentic even in a world that seems hostile, you know, there's a book that I wrote not too long ago called The Infinite Soul, INFJ Life in the Modern World. Looks at all these questions in depth. Authentic INFJ life that's blossoming in the world today. Love, laughter, friendship, what makes the INFJ unique, spirit, all these topics are discussed in the book. Check it out at the link below. If you have the book but have loved it but haven't reviewed it yet, please consider a review. It really helps with the referencing, okay? The Infinite Soul, and its prequel is called The Ecstatic Soul. You might have come across it. The link is below as well. Lots of reviews if you want to check the reviews. There's lots of them and they're quite positive. This is the deepest investigation of the INFJ mind, INFJ consciousness, and how it manifests in existence, its existential manifestations. I also call it the first book in Jungian existentialism, which I then develop further in The Infinite Soul. Okay, so Ecstatic Soul, Infinite Soul, get the two books linked below. And as you know, the lifeblood of my channel is my Patreon page. My channel really relies on your donations. That goes a long way toward helping me continue doing this, so please consider subscribing, becoming a patron. You get access to bonus content every 2 weeks, a video where I go in more detail about my current research, and that's exclusively for patrons. You can also interact with me, suggest video content on the mainstream YouTube. You get priority for that. There's a nice community that's growing there. Join us, please, and I'll talk to you soon, guys. Bye-bye.